Celebrated author Doug Casey is back. He is founder of Casey Research and founder of internationalman.com. Doug has a new book coming out. We'll be talking about that, as well as his macroeconomic outlook and where we're headed after the elections. Doug, welcome back. Pleasure to speak with you today.
Thank you, David. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
What you've been describing as the collapse of Western society. Can we narrow down the particulars? I get emails all the time from people who've watched our interviews in the past. They ask me, David, what does Doug actually mean? What exactly is going to collapse? Am I going to lose my home, my job, my income, what's going to happen to my savings? What do you mean by that, Doug?
Well, there are 12 factors that I put my finger on that are unique to Western civilization. And all of them are being washed away right now by a generalized movement. You can call it socialist ideas, welfare state ideas, the political correct movement. But the foundations of Western civilization, the things that made it different from and better than any other civilization, are being not just washed away, it's actually a controlled demolition of everything that the US stands for. And I could enumerate these 12 things and we could talk about them, but that's going to take 20 minutes and we won't be able to talk about anything else. I think I've got a whole bunch of stuff on this at internationalman.com if people want to read it and see if they think I'm right or wrong.
Well, liberty and justice for all, that's in the pledge. We still have liberty, don't we?
We have a patina of liberty. It's supposed to be guaranteed by the Bill of Rights, but the Bill of Rights are really just they're a dead letter today. They're talking points without a reality behind them. And if the Democrats are elected in November, I wouldn't be surprised if they opt for a constitutional convention sometime, which would change the entire political nature of the country. So, look, everything's changing now. This is a major upset we're looking at. This election coming up is the most important election since the one of 1860, where Abraham Lincoln ran against three other candidates and won. And the next step was a civil war. Actually, the unpleasantness of 1860 to 1865, 1861 to 1865, that wasn't a civil war, actually. That was a failed war of secession because the South just wanted to split and go their own way. But Lincoln said, not on my watch. It wasn't really about slavery at all, an idea which will shock most people. But this war should be about a secession because the so-called red counties and blue counties should just part company. But it could get violent, actually. I've been talking about the possibility of a civil war, as outrageous as that sounds, for a couple of years now. I was shocked myself when I first said it, but not anymore.
Right. So you don't mean this figuratively. You actually literally mean a civil war in the likes of the 1800s.
Yeah, look, war is a constant feature of human civilization. We've had thousands and thousands of wars since the Neolithic era ended. And they haven't stopped now. They've just gotten bigger and better. But it's possible. Look, when you've got two groups that really, really dislike each other on a visceral level and disagree about every philosophical and sociological and political point there is, and dislike each other, can't even have dinner together, they shouldn't be in the same political entity. So they should split up instead of one of them gaining control of the reins of power in Washington and imposing their will on the other one. That is the making of a civil war.
There's always been dissent between two opposing parties. This is nothing new. But what you're saying is that we've reached a level unprecedented in history. Why is that?
Well, this is basically a cultural thing going on. And cultural disputes are go to your actual view of the world, your view of what the world should be on the most basic level. And when you have that kind of a dispute, it's kind of irresolvable. You can't, it's like trying to change somebody else's personality. And this is much deeper than, polite political disputes of the past, where you can argue about, well, this is better or that's better, and you can agree to disagree. This isn't like that.
Well, what needs to happen, Doug? What needs to happen to bring the Union together, to prevent this civil war that you talked about?
The only way to solve this country's problems is not to look for political answers, but to depoliticize the whole thing. In other words, my answer to make America great again, it's not what the government should be doing. It would be reducing the functions of government by about 90%. I mean, abolishing spending, totally pulling out agencies by their roots and sowing Agent Orange where they came from. You've got to depoliticize this society and make it more civil as opposed to political. That's the only answer. But we're going in the opposite direction.
So let's talk about investment implications now. I want to recall your older work from the 80s and 90s, two wonderful books, Crisis Investing and then Crisis Investing in the 90s. The crises that we've seen in those decades don't really compare to what we're seeing now. So I'm sure the principles that you wrote about back then are just as applicable now than ever.
Since 1971, the markets and the economy have been in a bubble. They've rested on what the Federal Reserve does. And now it's completely a question of what the Fed does. The stock market bubble that we're in today and the bond market hyper bubble are 100% due to the trillions of new currency units being created by the Federal Reserve. The level of the stock market has nothing to do anymore with the economy. It has only to do with the amount of new money that flows out of the Fed in Washington. So what it's leading us to is what I called the Greater Depression. The actions of the government have caused tremendous distortions and misallocations of capital in the society that are going to have to be liquidated. Gigantic levels of debt that when the economy slows down, which it is now, much of which will be defaulted on. And some of that debt is all somebody else's asset. So we're looking at what I call the Greater Depression. It's going to be longer lasting and deeper and different from the unpleasantness of 1929 to 1946. So hold on to your hat. We're not having a V-shaped recovery. That's nonsense. That's political propaganda. This is going to go on for at least a decade, and it's going to be scary. And we're just in the first inning still, shockingly.
Wait a minute, Doug. So we're not in a depression already? I mean, if you take a look at annualized GDP this year, 33% contraction. That was multitudes worse than what we saw in 29.
Yes, we're already in a depression. We're just in the first inning of the depression.
So it's how's it gonna evolve? What specifically is gonna be worse in our society? We've already seen, a comatose economic environment where we've all been locked down and shut down for businesses and whatnot. Savings rates have skyrocketed. Unemployment has skyrocketed. How could things possibly get worse, Doug?
Oh, they could get a lot worse. For instance, the dollar still has value, but at some point, pretty soon, you're going to see retail prices going up radically in various places. And that's going to be scary. And what's the government going to do about that? Well, they might do what Nixon did back in 1971 and slap on wage and price controls. The government will likely put on foreign exchange controls as well to keep rich people from getting their capital outside of the country, because it's going to be increasingly dangerous to keep it in the United States. So there are going to be lots of differences. And of course, the prospect of war is with us.
Isn't this good for equities then? Isn't this good for investors? Because if you're, going back to what you said earlier, the worse the economy, the more the stimulus. And like you explained, we're not really relying on fundamentals and earnings anymore for stock market growth. All we need is stimulus. And so the worse our economic condition, the more money they're going to print out, the better it is for stocks. So isn't this a huge opportunity for investors?
For a period of time. And you shouldn't say investors at this point, David, because in today's world, it's very hard. It's almost impossible to be an investor since the world's so politically driven. Best, the stock market is going to crash at some point for all kinds of fundamental reasons, but it could double from here before it crashes. I doubt it, but it's possible because it's driven by monetary instruments. So you have to be a speculator. And an investor is somebody who plants the seed of corn and is willing to wait until the corn comes up, and then he's got many pieces of corn. It's predictable growth. But a speculator is one that takes advantage of politically caused distortions in the economy. And in this highly politicized world we live in today, you have to think like a speculator. You can forget about saving dollars. It's too bad. Most Americans, if they have assets, they're in the form of dollars. But that's going to prove to be as stupid over the next decade as an Argentine keeping his assets in the form of pesos. They're both fiat currencies.
So how do you feel about gold and gold stocks? I just spoke to Rick Rule, whom I've had on a panel with you not too long ago, and he told me that short-term junior gold equities are overbought. What do you think?
Well, yeah, that may or may not be true, but I don't care because we've seen bubbles in real estate, in marijuana stocks, in cryptocurrencies. We have a current bubble in the stock market. We have a hyper bubble in the bond market with interest rates closing in on zero. So what's the next bubble? That's what a speculator has to ask himself. And the answer to that is gold, also commodities in general. And in particular, there's going to be a super bubble in gold stocks. I expect that, look, since gold was de-price controlled by the US government in 1971, when the dollar was devalued, same thing, we've had 5 major gold bull markets where the junior stocks went up an average of 1,000%. Same thing is going to happen this time because now, relative to gold, all these gold stocks are at about one of the cheapest levels in history. They actually look at it this way: all-in sustaining costs. The best way to look at the costs of a gold mining company are about $1,000 an ounce for current producers. But gold is about $2,000 an ounce and going higher. But institutions and fund managers and banks and the big money has been indoctrinated against gold for many, many, many years, starting with their university years when they were miseducated in economics. They've been told that gold is a pet rock and so forth. So it's not even on their radar screen. So these gold mining companies that are in production are coining money at this point. And eventually they're going to figure it out and they're going to pile into them. But since the gold mining sector, the producers of the world, their current market caps are about the amount of cash that Apple alone has in its bank account. So Apple, theoretically, could buy every gold producer in the world right now just with its cash. That's how teeny-weeny they are. And when the public gets into them and the fund managers start figuring out what's happening to the dollar, it's going to be like trying to get the contents of Hoover Dam through a garden hose. It's going to be explosive. So I'm all in on gold stocks. Let's see if I'm right in the years to come.
Well, what's going to happen to gold and gold stocks following the election? Either way, Democrat or Republican win, do you think we'll have big moves in the yellow metal?
I do, because it doesn't matter whether we have a Harris regime or a Trump regime. Both of them are committed to printing up more dollars because they idiotically think that printing up dollars stimulates the economy and it helps the average person. And they're going to have to do it to bail out the big banks and to bail out big corporations that are going to be failing.
Okay, so Doug, let's tie all this into your new book now. You have a new book coming out. It's called Assassin. Tell us about that. What is this about?
Well, it's the third in the High Ground series with our hero, Charles Knight. The first book was Speculator, which I think gold investors should definitely read. Then Drug Lord, and now he becomes an assassin. And this is a discussion of the morality and the history of political assassination, and a discussion of whether political assassinations, past, present, and future, actually serve a useful purpose and whether they're right or wrong. And most people will think that a book with that name coming out today, when half the country hates Donald Trump, it must be about killing Trump. No, it's not. But it does discuss political assassinations in general.
Well, can you discuss the incentives behind political assassinations, again, in general? Maybe you can draw on a few case studies. What motivates a society to create individuals that would want to assassinate their leaders? I mean, we live in a democracy where supposedly we're supposed to enact change through the voting system, not through guns.
Well, look, the first well-known political assassination in history, which I talk about in the book, is that of Julius Caesar. And was that a good idea or a bad idea? I'm a fan of Roman history, so I think that's an interesting part of the book. And then I talk about the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. Was that actually a good thing or a bad thing? From whose point of view and so forth, the timing of it. And the morality of these things is important. So I'm trying to bring this up to the current date. And of course, this is fiction. This is a novel, but there are people that get killed in Assassin, and we discuss whether it's right, wrong, effective, ineffective, how it's done. So it's a hell of a read, if I do say so myself.
I like to end my interviews on a positive note where possible. So I'd like to ask you if you think there's anything positive coming out of American society today. What are some of the things you're looking forward to? I mean, I can name just off the top of my head several things, including technological innovation, improvements in living standards, improvements in the longevity of lifespans. One could argue more equality for all, and several other things. What about you?
I think you're right on those things, actually. It just depends on your time frame. I'm a big fan of Ray Kurzweil, and when people go on to Amazon to pick up Assassin, which I hope they do, they should also get a copy of Kurzweil's book, Singularity, which I'm sure that you're very familiar with as well, where Kurzweil predicts that 20 years from now, the entire nature of life will have changed because of technology. Our lives will be extended by many years, and everything's going to get better. That's the long-term trend. The long-term trend of history is we've arisen from grubbing roots and berries and beating on earth with a stick and living in caves to soon moving into the other planets and the stars. So yeah, I'm very optimistic for the long run. All I'm saying is we're in for some bad times over the next decade, starting like now. But listen, more good news that's relevant to people listening right now is if they buy the right gold stocks, and there are about 2,000 companies that say they're gold companies, 90% of them are crap, but if they buy the right ones now, they're going to make enough money that they don't have to worry about the riots in the streets. They can get themselves to a safe and comfortable place and watch the riots on their widescreen TV.
Thank you for your thoughts as always, Doug. Very enlightening.
Pleasure, David.
Best of luck with the conference. And thank you for watching Kitco News. I'm David Lynn. Stay tuned.